Hello everyone and welcome to round 9 of the 2018 Biel Chess Festival. It's Shakhriyar Mamedyarov versus Magnus Carlsen, the most awaited game of the tournament so far, as Shakhriyar Mamedyarov is leading the tournament by 1 full point ahead of Magnus Carlsen. So Carlsen would definitely enjoy winning this game, or at least drawing it, as he faces Nico Georgiadis in the final round with the white pieces, and Mamedyarov also has to face Peter Svidler, where Svidler will have the white pieces in the final round. So before we check out the game, we have a couple of photos. Here, a very nice photo of Mamedyarov versus Carlsen. It's still from the opening. Both of them just, enjoying the position. Here we have a nice close-up of Magnus Carlsen. Also here, a nice close-up of Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. And I prepared something I'm sure you'll enjoy. This is their score so far. So regarding classical games, Magnus Carlsen beat Shakhriyar Mamedyarov 5-1. So 5 wins Carlsen, 1 win Mamedyarov with 11 draws. And if you include rapid and exhibition games, then the score is 19-3 for Magnus Carlsen with 17 draws. So whichever format you check out, classical or rapid exhibition, Carlsen is in the lead. So also a very nice opportunity for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, as I believe two of them are the only two players that are above 2800 rating. So that being said, let's check out this game. And it's also interesting that this is a game of two world champions, and as Magnus Carlsen is the reigning world champion, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov is the junior world chess champion, as he won the junior world chess championship, but he's actually the only player ever to win the junior world chess championship twice. Junior world chess championship is below 20 years of age. So let's check it out. Mamedyarov opens with d4, and it's very interesting. I don't know if you remember the Tal versus Botvinnik series, where Botvinnik would open either with knight f3 or c4, and then when Botvinnik finally opened with the d4, Tal knew that Botvinnik was up for a fight. So could be the same in this case. Mamedyarov is definitely up for a fight with the white pieces. Knight to f6, c4, g6, we have the king's Indian defense on the board, g3, bishop to g7, bishop to g2, we have castles, knight to c3, d6, and now knight to f3. Carlsen goes c5, and here we have castles, knight to c6 and e3. Mamedyarov said in an interview after the game that he doesn't really like this e3 move, but it's not bad. Here white can also push d5, immediately grabbing the space in the center, and then you could play something like knight a5, knight e5, knight back to b8. I myself enjoy knight back to b8, but whatever works for you, I guess. So after knight to c6, we have e3. Carlsen goes d5. Now Mamedyarov said that he didn't think that d5 move was actually, very good for black, but Carlsen said that if white plays e3, which is a bit more rare, that d5 is actually good for black, and that it's actually white who will struggle if he wants something more other than equality. So okay, c captures on d5, knight captures, queen captures, and then now comes knight to e5, opening a discovered attack against Carlsen's queen. We have queen d6, knight to c4 now, attacking the queen, queen to c7, and now d5. So a very nice expansion by Mamedyarov. First, rook to d8, developing the rook as the pawn is now pinned. Bishop to d2. Now, the pawn is no longer pinned, as the queen will not be under attack if pawn captures. And here, knight to b4. And this is Carlsen showing that he would enjoy something more than a draw in this game. Because if he wanted, he could have gone knight to e5, and then go for a series of exchanges. Knight captures, bishop captures, after bishop c3, captures, and after b5, it would be a fine position for both of them, with a lot of pieces, already traded down. So after bishop to d2, Carlsen goes knight to b4, and this will create a lot of complications. Bishop captures, pawn captures on b4, and now comes rook to c1, threatening all sorts of discovered attacks, but none of them actually work for now. So a5 first. We have a3, pawn captures on a3, pawn captures on a3, and now comes a4. A very nice idea. Grabbing more space, perhaps preparing the b3 square for the rook in the future, maybe after the b pawn is traded down, but also locking down white's a3 pawn on a dark square, so black will be able to attack it later. we have queen to d3, and here comes a move that Carlsen totally miscalculated, because there are a lot of moves possible here. For example, rook b8, preparing to push b5. Carlsen said in an interview after the game that rook to a6 is a very interesting move. Also, if bishop to d7, then Carlsen says that d6 pawn captures knight to e5, opening up a discovered attack against the queen, but that the black would be fine here. For example, if we check queen to a5, okay, the b7 pawn is under attack, but you can simply capture here, and not even capture on b7. You can go bishop here, and the white will have some nice pressure, but black should be able to hold this, Carlsen thinks. But after queen to d3, he played bishop to f5. He knew that, of course, e4 was coming. He brought the bishop back to d7, which was possible right away, but then he says he totally missed queen to e3. Queen to e3, preparing knight to b6, and now this would be a very powerful discovery, as the queen is guarding the b6 square, and this would open up an attack towards Carlsen's queen from the rook on c1, and also attack the a8 rook. So he does have to do something. He played rook to a6. But he says that he did not enjoy his position here. e5 by Mamedyarov, b5 attacking the knight, and now comes d6. So first, not reacting to the attack against the knight. Now Carlsen's queen is under attack. And here, what do you do here? If you play something like knight to, instead of this move, you could play something like knight to d6, but it doesn't work. For example, opening up a discovered attack towards the queen, but after queen moves, knight captures on f7, king captures, e6 check, captures. There's nothing for white here. Black is perfectly fine here, even up a pawn. So instead, after this b5 move, like we said, there are no good discoveries, this doesn't work, d6 was played. Here we have queen to b8. Capturing on d6 doesn't really achieve anything, simply helps white. D captures on e7, attacking Carlsen's rook, so you still cannot capture knight on c4. Rook to e8, and now comes rook f to d1, offering the knight here in exchange for rook captures on d7. Carlsen doesn't like this. First he captures the pawn back, rook captures on e7, but now comes queen to c5. Here again Mamedyarov does not react to this, because now queen captures on e7 is a possibility. And here Carlsen played queen to f8. This was a miscalculation, but again, there's really not all that much you can play here. Queen to d8 doesn't work because, okay, you protect the rook, but queen captures on b5 is coming, the bishop is pinned, as the rook will be attacking the queen. And after queen to c5, a move that could have been played for perhaps, is bishop to f8. But this is an engine move, very unlikely for a human to play it, because now after knight to d6, you get rook captures on e5. This is the whole point. Queen captures rook, and now rook captures on d6. Rook captures, bishop captures, and now you will have, black will be up a pawn, but also black will have a bishop pair, and now if this is holdable, the engine prefers this position to the one Carlsen chose. So after queen to c5, we have queen to f8, knight to e3, and this is the move Carlsen missed when he played queen to f8. If he had saw this move, perhaps he would search longer and then perhaps find the bishop to f8. Here, knight to e3 seems impossible, because of course you're constantly thinking the knight has to keep an eye on the e5 pawn, but actually it doesn't, because now you cannot capture, for example, bishop captures, as you get rook captures on d7, rook captures and queen captures. The other problem is even rook captures on e5 doesn't work, because first you will capture the queen there. And after bishop captures, rook captures, bishop to a3, capturing the pawn, and it seems like, okay, black is down a piece, but you have two connected passed pawns. Perhaps, this means something. But not really, because the variation is forced. Rook to c8 check, king moves, rook to c7, attacking the f7 pawn. There's really no good way to defend it. Only way is rook to f6, and now comes knight to g4. Attacking both rooks, and now after rook moves, rook e1, we have bishop to f1, blocking, and now after rook comes to f5, now comes king g2, and pretty much whatever black plays, let's say h5, knight e3, attacking the rook. Rook still has to keep an eye on the f7 pawn, knight to d5 now, rook moves, and now bishop to d3 will win the rook, rather the exchange. Rook has to move, rook e5, and now rook captures on f7. Okay, or either you will capture the knight or allow bishop captures rook. If you move the rook, then of course you are getting checkmated here. After rook to f7, this will be checkmate. So not a simple position, definitely. So here, after knight to e3, Carlsen saw that this was not possible. He played bishop to e6. We have queen captures on b5, grabbing a pawn, rook to a7, and now knight to d5. Bishop captures, rook captures on d5, and now rook e to b7. Queen to d3, rook comes to b8, not allowing rook to d8 to win Carlsen's queen. Now comes h4. We have queen to e8 and queen to d4 now, attacking Carlsen's rook on a7. Queen to e7, defending the rook, and now f4. And here Carlsen plays bishop to f8, which is a very nice move. If you go for the a3 pawn, which is definitely offered, after queen captures on a7, queen captures rook on c1 with check. King can now move to h2 as h4 was played. And now you don't really have anything with rook to b1 and queen to g1. The king will be very safe on h3. And if you tried the most promising variation, rook b2, then you get rook d7, attacking the f7 pawn. And after queen c2, attacking the bishop on g2, here comes queen a8 check. Bishop blocks and rook to d8. The queen is guarding the bishop here, so there are no threats, and there is very little you can do against this threat. So that would be very nice for white, but you know, it's very hard to find such a move. So okay, after f4 we have bishop to f8, king to h2, a very nice move, not allowing anything you know, to happen to the king while on the first rank, some discovered check or something. Rook to b7 by Carlsen, and now here everyone thought that rook to d6 would be the idea here, simply not allowing Carlsen to threaten queen captures on a3, and this would definitely keep up the pressure. But he decided to go for queen captures on a4 and allow this exchange. Queen captures on a3 was played, queen captures on a3, bishop captures on a3, and now rook c to d1. We have bishop to e7, and now comes king to h3. Improving the position of the king. Rook to d7 doesn't really do all that much just yet, because rook simply captures, rook captures, and after king to f8, everything is defended nicely. It's very hard to actually push for something here. It's 4 pawns against 3, all of the pawns are on the king side, and the bishops are of opposite colors. So, okay, after bishop to e7, we have king to h3, and now rook to c7. We have h5, and here everyone thought that, okay, of course, you can capture a pawn here, but then your pawn structure would be completely ruined. No one would do this. Better yet, maybe simply make a move, king f8 or something. But actually, Carlsen simply captures it here. G captures on h5. Now, the material on the board is equal, but of course, Mamedyarov's pawn structure is much better here. We have f5. Carlsen pushes f6. He doesn't want Mamedyarov to push f6. Now comes e6. Mamedyarov now has an extremely strong passed pawn here. Rook to b3, and here comes rook to d7. You can't go king h4 or something to go after this pawn, because then you have a g3 pawn hanging here, and of course rook to c4 will either force you to capture it or move back. So instead we have rook to d7, and now comes rook to c3. Keeping an eye on that rook. Rook to a1, now comes king to g7, and now rook to a8. Here, king to h6 is played by Carlsen. We have rook to e8, attacking the bishop, and here bishop to b4 is played. Bishop to b4, a nice move. Perhaps after this rook moves, then bishop to e1 will be possible, pressuring that g3 pawn. The rook will also be pressuring it, but also possible instead of bishop b4 was a bishop to a3. And now after rook h8, for example, attacking the h7 pawn, Carlsen could simply retreat bishop to e7, but a similar idea was played in the game. After rook e8, bishop to b4 was played, and now comes rook to b8, attacking Carlsen's bishop. Carlsen moves the bishop back, and here you could do something like a rook back to e8 and then go for the whole rook to h8 idea, but instead bishop to e4 was played by Mamedyarov. We have rook 3 to c4, attacking the bishop, but also possible was rook to e3. It's also a very hard move to find that allows rook captures on c7, and now bishop to d6. But it's also very unlikely that black would be able to hold this. For example, now rook to g8, defending the g3 pawn, as the bishop and rook are attacking it here. After you capture the rook, now e7 is coming. And now after rook captures on e4, you get the queen, rook captures, and now king to g5. And after rook attacks the bishop and the pawn, bishop e5, rook captures on h7 is coming, and it's very unlikely that black could actually hold this. But okay, after bishop to e4, rook 3 to c4, attacking Mamedyarov's bishop on e4. We have bishop to d5, and now comes bishop to rook to c5, attacking the bishop. Bishop back to e4, rook to c4, and here bishop to d5. And Carlsen repeats rook to c5. So if Mamedyarov would repeat bishop to e4 once again, it would be a draw. But instead he goes rook to b7. And now you have to decide what to do here. Capturing on b7 would actually lose you the game, as after bishop captures, your bishop is under attack. After you move at e7, the game is won. You lose the piece and the game. But after rook to b7, Carlsen played the correct move. Rook captures on d7. We have rook captures on d7. And here, again, a very... I mean, this is calculating positions like these is what chess is all about. Carlsen played rook to a5. Simply, if rook captures here, then he will capture back here. Also possible was bishop to f8, and now we have a very complicated position. If you push e7, black will simply capture it. After rook captures it, you will capture the bishop on d5. But we have a very exciting moment after bishop to a8 is played. Now you have to attack the bishop once again after bishop to c6. This is the exciting moment, because now it is no longer possible to keep attacking the light square bishop, because now you can simply push e7. And after captures, white does not recapture immediately, rather there is an in-between move, a Zwischenzug, bishop to b7, and after rook moves, now you capture the bishop on e7, and you are up a piece. So after this bishop to c6, you would not be able to attack it. You would have to play bishop to a3. And now we would get rook to f7, attacking the f6 pawn. Rook captures on f5. e7 would be played. Now you would have to capture it, as there would be no stopping promotion. Rook captures. And now after rook attacks bishop, it would be 3 pawns against 1. And if one of these pawns could ever be sacrificed for this pawn, then a rook and bishop against a rook and 2 kings is a theoretical draw. But it's if you don't know exactly how to hold it, then you perhaps, a lot of grandmasters have lost this position. But probably Carlsen would know how to hold it. But okay, after rook captures on d7, rook to a5 was played. We have bishop to c6. Now you see that the bishop is on the correct square. It will not be possible to attack it. So now comes a bishop to a3. We have rook to f7, attacking the f6 pawn. The threat is, of course, pushing the pawn to e7. And here you have to decide what you want to do. If you want to capture on f5, allow e7, and then after bishop captures, go into the same variation as we discussed. Or play rook to e5, which is what Carlsen played. And now it's very interesting. It seems that now white can freely capture the f6 pawn, but this would not go, in white's favor. After king g5, the rook is under attack. Rook f7. Now comes bishop to d6, and it's not all that easy to push these pawns. The rook and bishop are guarding it, and rook to e3, followed by rook captures, and g3 is coming. So after bishop d7, rook to e3, king moves, rook captures, king moves. Now comes h4, and now comes the main idea. After you push e7, threaten to promote, you have bishop to c5 with a forced draw. After the king moves, you will either play rook to e3, and now the king has to move back to either f1 or f2. Of course not f2, but f1. And if you try to run away with the king, then simply rook captures on e7, and it's now a draw. After rook captures, bishop captures, it's black who has actually 2 pawns, but doesn't matter. Opposite colored bishops, it will be a draw. But here comes a move Carlsen missed when he played rook to e5. Probably if he saw this, then he would capture here, king to h4. He doesn't allow, Mamedyarov doesn't allow Carlsen to come to g5 with his king, and now rook captures here is definitely a very nice threat. And here Carlsen says that when he saw king to h4, that he knew that he blundered, that he was lost, and probably this is the moment where he stopped thinking. But I think someone mentioned during the live feed that the Norwegian supercomputer Sassy said that even this was not lost, that black could actually still hold this after bishop to b4, you know, just allowing white to make a move. Still, both bishop and rook are controlling the e7 square. Even though the g5 square is not available for the king now, there's still no clear way to actually push for white here. But as Carlsen was very unimpressed with himself, you know, he could not believe it. After that he missed such a move like king to h4, he played bishop to c1, and here he thought, he didn't think anything. But after Mamedyarov played e7, Carlsen simply started shaking his head that he missed such a move, and it was in this position, on move 57, that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. There are some ideas. Okay, the bishop is controlling here, the pawn is controlling here. Maybe you could go for something like rook to e2 to deliver rook to h2 checkmate, but it doesn't work. King will simply go back, and after you try something, white will simply bring a queen into the game, and after rook captures, bishop captures, white will be completely winning, as they're, you know, after king captures, rook captures, it's not the same as anything we've seen before, where black could actually hold this being down material. So yeah, after bishop to after e7, Carlsen resigned. He blundered with this bishop to c1 move, and although again he thought he was completely lost here, I believe someone did mention it in the live feed that Norwegian supercomputer Sassy said that this was still holdable. But okay, bishop to c1, e7, and a beautiful, beautiful win for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. We have to check it out one more time. There you have it. The last time this one win in classical chess Mamedyarov achieved against Magnus Carlsen was in 2008 in the Chess Olympiad, so over 10 years ago. So this is a huge moment for him, and a huge, huge victory for him, you know, taking down the world champion. And there you have it. Here are the standings. No, these are not the standings. These are not the correct standings. Sorry about that. I'm pretty sure I had them here. Nope, not that. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to bring it in. Okay, there we have it. Sorry about that. Okay, so there you are. So Mamedyarov in clear first place, so one round before the tournament even ended. So it doesn't matter how he plays out his game against Peter Svidler tomorrow. He is already 2 points ahead of Magnus Carlsen, and you know, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov won the 2018 Biel Chess Festival. Carlsen is now second with 5 out of 9. Svidler also in second place, tied with Carlsen with 5 out of 9. Then Maxime Vachier-Lagrave 4.5 out of 9. Navarro David with 4 out of 9, and Nico Georgiadis with another draw with 1.5 out of 9. So it will be, although the tournament is over, I'm very, very interested how Carlsen's game against young Nico tomorrow will end up, because it's a terrible position to be in. You just lost a game against Mamedyarov. There are no more chances for you to win the tournament, and tomorrow you could, you know, you're probably gonna play a very long game, a 6-hour game against someone who is more than 300 rating points below you. So even if you draw, you will lose rating there. So not the greatest position to be in for Magnus Carlsen, but an amazing position for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, who probably played the best tournament of his life. Well, he did come second in the candidates tournament this year, but you know, that's he did not enjoy that. Second in the candidates is almost like last in the candidates. But yeah, okay, that's the game. The video is a bit longer, but you know, it's such an end game, it's unavoidable. I do hope you enjoyed it and that you've enjoyed the coverage of the Biel Chess Festival so far. I would like to thank Silvio De Carli, Calvin Peak, and Anthony Villalpando for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with a video from the Bobby Fischer series, as I couldn't make it to upload a video today from that series, and of course with the final round of the Biel Chess Festival. So thank you all, and I will see you soon.